we're very interested in the combination of design, branding, and innovation coming together on behalf of clients. And that's effectively what we're doing most of our time. So we've collected a few thoughts today, which are pretty high level, but hopefully give you a sense of the similar types of topics that might be on your agenda and ways in which you might start addressing them, and particularly in the financial services space where we do have some interesting clients and some experience. So why should we care? And the answer to that is partly because customers care. They're talking more and more about design, understanding what it is, and demanding it from their brands. So this is the Mail. Maybe some of you read this paper, and you'll know that this site is one of the most popular sites in the world. This article bubbled right up to the top when Apple launched, and it's showing the strength of the design question, but also the brand itself, and how people are responding to that every day. Tim, maybe you want to talk about our friend here.
Oh, yeah. So this is another reason why you should focus on innovation. This is Kodak's first digital camera, invented, I think, in 1975, a very compact and bijou device. They obviously weren't focusing on getting that innovation out the door. So although, fantastic invention for 1975, where are the Kodak digital cameras today?
And then if we're thinking a little bit about brand, does anyone know what this is? It's a vampire squid. And obviously that's quite topical for the financial services industry. And, how do we think about big companies and small companies and how they symbolized in people's minds is an important question. Okay, so some things that we've seen, that we've personally experienced via our clients in this space. A few years ago, we started working with Savile Row Taylor, called Norton & Sons. And the director there, one of the first points he made in the meeting with us was that his customers are dying. So quite a difficult challenge. He'd bought this business, had a very, very strong customer base, but they were of a certain age. And the younger guys weren't coming in, they were intimidated, they weren't understanding the product, and he had to reconnect with a younger audience around the product. I'm just going to show you a film here, which was actually a BBC4 documentary about Savile Row, and actually they featured Norton & Sons quite a bit. And what's interesting here that I'd like to highlight is the discussion that we're having with Patrick about something that seems very small, which is a label that's going to be stitched into a jacket, and how important that is and how it reflects his business, his brand, and the design that he creates.
It must speak of modernity while remaining old-fashioned and exclusive.
If it does feel a little bit untouchable, then I think we've done it right and not got it wrong, because we don't want to be too accessible. We are not accessible. We are very expensive and very exclusive, and we don't make any excuses for that. That's really good.
Richard James has read the runes. The young and moneyed are rejecting the mass for the unique and individual, the cheap and fashionable for the expensive and classic. Brandman Ben Wolstenholme is one of them. He's about to become his client's client. Wolstenholme's a jeans and knitwear kind of man. But as he was recrafting Norton's 187-year-old image for the post-millennial generation, he fell under the bespoke spell.
How are you? All right, nice to see you.
Yeah,
nice to see you. Come through, we're all ready for you.
At number 16, something magical is happening.
Tell me.
That's something everyone's got to have done, I think.
And that'll see you till you die, I think.
This is symbiosis. Nortons are transforming Ben. Ben is transforming Nortons. His redesign of the shopfront is a bold statement of modernity. The old iron signage is in the scrapyard. The new old-fashioned logo will appeal to the young customers, who are the future. The neighbours are hardly likely to complain either. They may not even notice. Progress by stealth is the Savile Row way.
Quite an interesting journey with Patrick. We've been working with him for about 7 years. After he repositioned the business around what the story was of that company, Norton & Sons, he became quite successful, actually. And going from a company that I think was losing money, he got to a position where he was unable to, he didn't have the capacity to make enough suits for his customers. I think that was within about 3 years. And then another question arose where he asked us our opinion on whether he ought to stretch the brand and go into beyond bespoke into ready-to-wear, or whether he ought to think about another business entirely. And actually what this visual is trying to demonstrate is that on the left-hand side, that's a very typical image of a bespoke suit being fitted. That's his core customer. And on the right-hand side was a new type of customer that he was trying to go after. We advised him to actually create a portfolio of brands and to split into two with two very clear different audiences and two different stories. So the point we're trying to get here is if you understand what the brand is about, you can define the experience and target the audience appropriately. Just stretching and stretching, ultimately it's going to break and it will be everything to everybody, therefore nothing. If you look at what's happened in Savile Row, some of you may even shop there, you'll notice that quite a lot of the brands there have actually stretched to the point where they're no longer exclusive. They're not nearly as interesting as they were in the past. And actually, by bucking that trend, you got into a quite interesting position.
Many companies sometimes feel they're not really in touch with their customers. They don't know who their customers are or what they're doing. So there are obviously many ways of finding out about your customers. But if you're taking it from a design perspective, some good examples are Lego, for instance. So around the early 2000s, Lego was really struggling. It wasn't really connecting with its customers. People weren't getting Lego. And Lego was very worried that video games would take over and that no one would ever play with Lego kits again. Well, fortunately, I think for all of us, Lego sent anthropologists out in the field. And this is not market research or focus groups or those kinds of things. They actually sent out social scientists to go and study kids playing in their natural habitat, you know, in their front rooms, in their bedrooms, and those kind of things. They really understood about what kids were doing. And one of the things they learnt was that they kept trying to make the Lego kits easier so to compete with the games. But in fact, what kids told them was that mastery and actually completing these kits, doing something a difficult challenge is what they valued. It's one of the findings they found. And so actually, Lego started making harder kits that you could proudly boast that you had completed it and solved it. So by actually going into the field and studying people actually using their product actually in their homes and in their playgrounds and those kind of things, Lego were able to find these insights and use them to really grow their business. So much so that 2008 was a kind of booming year for them, where for many people it wasn't. So this brilliant innovation, the Swiffer, again, another really good example of kind of the way that design uses user research. So the Swiffer was at a time when Procter & Gamble were looking for new cleaning products. And one of the challenges of new cleaning products was if you make them stronger, there's a point at which they start eating up the carpet or eating up your tiles. So how can you make a better cleaning product? And again, they sent anthropologists into the field to study people, how people cleaned and washed and tidied their homes. And the big finding was that people actually spent more time cleaning their mops. Mops were a terrible project than actually cleaning the floor itself. So they came up with the Swiffer. And that, again, has been a massive business for them and, you know, copied globally. So two good instances of using anthropological research, I think, which is kind of different. You know, it's not the market research. It's not when you get people in. It's going out, discovering and looking at people.
Yeah, actually, you reminded me on the Norton's piece of work, which is very small. One of the things I personally did was sit in his shop on Savile Row for a day and just observe. I just sat there in the corner and watched all the interactions that were happening and wrote them down. Not in a very scientific fashion, but just making observations in a way that anybody could. And actually, whatever type of product or service you're creating, you can do that. You can do that at home with your family or anything. But getting a sense of how people feel out in the real world is very important.
Okay, so here's another question. I'm glad that you have brilliant, you have loads of money to spend on innovation. Fantastic. How should you spend it? Well, maybe you shouldn't spend it like this next slide. So the BBC spent 100 million on their archiving project, and that's recently come up in the news, then that's the kind of idea that you can kind of go away and, oh, I think I need a piece of innovation. I'll just buy it off the shelf from here and drag it into my organization. That's probably not going to work. It's probably not using innovation in the best possible way. If we hop to the next lovely slide, I think it's worth thinking about maybe actually incubating innovation in your own organization. Like companies that are successful at innovating, it's not a mysterious, oh, how did it happen? They actually think long and hard about creating an environment or an infrastructure where people can innovate. So for instance, Pixar has a massive atrium in the middle of their building. So their computer scientists who are on one floor and their animators are on another floor, or their finance people are on another floor, can bump into each other. In fact, they make it impossible for you not to be able to bump into each other, since they put the pens and the toilets all in one place. So you're kind of forced to bump into each other. And these kind of bumpings are the things that bring ideas together. And so, you know, an animator might have a great idea for a technique, and a computer programmer together, they might realize a fantastic idea. And similarly, you know, I think we think of Darwin as someone who came up with lots of fantastic ideas. But again, he worked very hard at it. First, he traveled the world and saw many different things. But even he spent time, you know, one of the things about innovation is it percolates up from your subconscious. So you actually have to give your time to self to think. And Darwin had a walking path that he built round his house that he actually spent time walking round. And he used to kick the stones on each circuit to the side to count the number of circuits he'd been round. And apparently his kids sometimes hid the stones, so maybe if he wanted them to stay out later thinking, they'd hide them from him. But that's also very similar to many other companies. Like, so if you think about Google or 3M, both those companies set time aside for you to think. Google gives you 10%. 3M actually encourages, again, people to walk around campus. And another company, Valve, moving on to another bearded person, has his fantastic Half-Life series, but they, again, put lots of things in place to make sure that their company is innovative. One thing they do is they have a very flat organizational structure. And the other part is that all the desks are on wheels, and you can actually unplug them from the floor and trundle them up to the team you're in. So all these companies have a similar idea in place, which is like, innovation doesn't just happen. You actually have to create the right conditions and environment to do that. And so I think that's a critical part of encouraging innovation in your organization.
Okay, so this is another point that was raised in a meeting with a company we worked with a couple of years ago called Trumpet. And they'd invented a very interesting algorithm where they could do recommendation for restaurants for eating out based on people's social networks. And they were called Trumpet. I'm going to show you a couple of films, which one of them is quite odd. But it was really about trying to get to what is the company about and what are its customers about, so we could break that down and then rebuild a brand based on what it ought to be.
It's not even a real word.
Yes, it is.
What is?
It's a verb. It's a conjunction, a preposition, it's a philosophy, a way of life. It's your name with ness attached to it.
And if you want me to, I will take off all my clothes for you. I'll take off all my clothes for you, if that's what you're into.
There's a couple ways to get around the app. Touch anywhere on the screen, brings up your set of controls. Hit this one, table of contents, and then... Excuse me. Hello.
I tend to think of myself as a one-man wolf pack.
Put a bird on it! Look at this. I just sewed this bird right onto the pillow.
Put a
bird
on
it.
Oh, it's alright, because I can sedate him with perhaps, like, if you sang a melody or something into my abdomen, it might sedate him. That's up to you, Noah. But, you know,
I don't mind getting
you're here
down
to
there
help
and
people.
sedating him.
Sing a melody into my abdomen, then. I don't know why you're not doing it. You're meant to be here to help.
Charlie! Charlie, I have the amulet!
What amulet? What's going on?
The amulet, Charlie! The magical amulet! Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle!
What my friend here was trying to tell you is, we want to get you in on the ground floor of a very disruptive new hyper-local coupon deal site.
These try kitten mittens!
So here's a table of contents. Give it a firm swipe. You find something you want to read. And bingo was his name-o.
Okay, so quite odd. And the point there was this company we felt was really interesting in the sense that it could be a reflection of everybody's eccentricities. So it's my nest, it's my Mac nest, it's Tim's nest, it's your nest, and so on. And so we had this idea that that could be the name, Nest. And that's the insight part, coming up with stimulus to work around that concept. And then here's how it starts to get into the slightly harder work, but still very interesting, of building that into a brand, something that can turn into a visual identity, can turn into a product experience, some innovation ideas, and so forth. And you'll get a sense of how we go about that here. Okay, so you can see there's a research stage, of course, looking at what other people are doing, where's the opportunity, then moving into design, and then finally into the product itself and the service in a wider sense. And then the result of that is it works. It's built brilliantly. It was always built brilliantly, but it also feels brilliant. Those two things in combination have made it more successful. They recently took quite a big investment, I think, from Visa, so they're doing quite nicely. So the point we're trying to make here is that you can craft something from the story. There's a story about Nest there, and you can use that to drive the way in which you craft the experience for people at the end of the day. So this is talking about a couple of pieces of work that we've done which are a little bit more about a large organization trying to do something that requires different people from different parts of the company to work together and collaborate, which I'm sure many of you have been in the situation where that's sometimes difficult for cultural reasons, geographical reasons, expertise reasons, and so forth. We recently did a website for a business out in Switzerland called SRF, which are kind of like the BBC of Switzerland. And the brief was around a website, but it involved a merger of a radio business and a TV business. Now, through that process, part of what came up was that the way in which the people who are generating the content, the journalists and all the people around those teams were organized, needed to be looked at differently in order to be able to deliver what the end customer, the end user, needed effectively. So this visual, a little bit complex, but what it's trying to say is, in the middle is the website, and all around that, what's the organization that delivers the right content for people? And they actually went through quite an interesting process where they reorganized themselves to make that product work very well. This is a visual of the desktop and mobile site. It's won a couple of awards out in Switzerland already, and it seems to be working very well. So we're quite proud of that one. When you've got a complex organization, this is actually a shot I took last week from a workshop we ran for a very unusually structured business or organization that's part political body, part ex-civil service, part media business, part membership organization. And you can see that there's very different perspectives on what the company's trying to achieve as a whole. We set up workshops, we facilitate this with common goals. I think that's very important, and it's not about everybody trying to do everyone else's job. There's some rules. People are there to give and help with the bit they're best at, but there's a common goal together. So this is an interesting area of design, which isn't visual and it doesn't end up as a form, but you're designing the opportunity for something to happen, and something that with the larger organizations is more and more important. So the kind of takeout there might be bringing people together, define some common rules or framework, and then let them use their strengths to help build out the opportunity.
So buy-in. So how you have a fantastic idea, your idea is awesome, it's in your head. How do you possibly tell people about it and how great it is and win them round?
Two companies that we worked with to help them with a potential joint venture. So it's a speaker business, a high-end speaker business and a high-end automotive business, and they were looking to do something together. There was a lot of documentation, business case about how they could do this multi-year program together, but we wanted to set up the discussion in a slightly different way and move it into a more emotive space. They're both in the business of creating emotive experiences, and so we created this film, and just this was the first thing we showed in the meeting. So that's actually a Maserati MC12. Don't know if anyone knows what this fast, expensive car. Played through a speaker, a Bowers & Wilkins speaker, and that substance is cornstarch. So it's just, that's live action, there's no animation, there's no magic going on there. It's just playing straight through there and pushing the vibrations through that liquid. And as you can imagine, that was quite an interesting start to the conversation. It wasn't instead of a business conversation, but it set it up as also an emotive conversation, because ultimately people who buy those products are interested in that topic also.
I guess what we're trying to say is instead of trying to PowerPoint people to death with bullet points, show them what you mean. So for instance, when I was working for Nokia, we were looking at home screens and we wanted people to understand and redesign home screens. And so we made them lots of sheets of paper and cut them out and stuck them on card, and then got people to assemble the kind of home screens they wanted. And one of the interesting things is that people always put them around the pictures, still something that people could, you know, no one puts them over the face of the favorite pet or animal in their picture. And we learned lots by doing this, but even more importantly, it was a really fantastic way to communicate between all the teams in Nokia that were working on this project and to communicate with our customers. So actually by doing it rather than telling people about it, we were able to have these great conversations about what the home screen meant. And prototypes don't just have to be paper, of course. Here is a sort of a mock-up of a phone that we used in Nokia to sort of test. This was one where you could squeeze it, shake it, and control it in all kinds of different ways. But I guess one of the important stories that comes from this is that I think we spent 6 months speaking to various departments about concepts for home screens. And they were just shaking their heads and people were not sure. And I finally put a prototype in the hands of someone, and it took them, it must have been at least 10 seconds, and they're like, now I get it. Which means that sort of, to me, that is 6 months of PowerPoint presentations was worth 10 seconds of a prototype. So it makes you think about how do you want to communicate your idea most effectively, and that in that situation was the most effective way. And of course, now we have fantastic tools for prototyping with things like 3D printers, and this is actually our 3D printer in our studio, which one year we used to print 3D chocolate Christmas ornaments. But you know, the 3D printers and all these kind of technologies for making and building stuff just means there's almost no excuse why you shouldn't be engaging and building things and trying them out, because that's a great way of learning about the thing you're building, but also telling people about it in a very obvious way.
We're running out of time. I'm just wondering whether I could take 1 minute just to wrap up with two examples here. So we just thought it'd be interesting to look at a brand new company and a company that's been around over 100 years and think about if we could identify ways they're using brand, design and innovation to be successful. So we took Square, brand new company, Burberry, I think it's about 120 years old, something like that, maybe 100 years old. If we're looking at their brands, on the right-hand side, Burberry started in the First World War, literally making coats for trenches. That's their core product where they started. And you can see that Square is interesting because it's very aligned to the Apple brand in terms of its design and the way it looks and so forth. So kind of very clear focus on the core thing that they've done. Going into the design language, Burberry, you've got that same core idea of the trench coat, but extrapolated and skewed out into lots of different modern, interesting designs, but never losing its core. I think that's one of the main things the CEO talks about, going back to the core and building from that core. Same with Square. I think there's a lot about simplicity, usability, and again, aligned very clearly to the Apple look and feel, which is we all understand and are used to and see as quality. Some innovation things that they do, obviously Square's the physical product and the interface by which you take the payments has changed a lot of things. Obviously, you will know more about that than we will. And then Burberry with their Art of the Trench site, which is in some ways a kind of communications exercise, but it's a very innovative way to think about communities and communication and bring customers into a conversation. So that's it, really. That's the end. Thank you very much.